Welcome to Silicon Valley Successes. I'm your host, Sean Flynn. I've worked with incubators, accelerators, angels, VCs over the years, and I've been excited about helping the startup ecosystem and doing this TV show here. And on today, we have an amazing guest. We have Whit Howland, who is a sales consultant that works with companies at all stages, and we're going to find out a lot of tips and tricks and knowledge that will help startups at home for sales and marketing. So, with that, let's start the show. So welcome back to Silicon Valley Successes. Now, Whit, could you please give an introduction, a little bit about yourself?
Sure, of course. My name is Whit Howland. I have been selling in the greater Bay Area for about 3.5 years and in sales for the bulk of my career. And I've recently joined up with an accelerator selling.
Which accelerator is that?
French Tech Hub.
Okay.
Out of the Dogpatch, which is in the city, selling for different startups that are primarily French by origins, trying to enter the U.S. marketplace. So they could be a startup. It could be anything from a data analytics platform to cybersecurity to some type of IoT device. So the products that I'm selling or representing can range in the nature of them, but all the companies are looking for quote unquote U.S. market share. So they're all trying to gain a foothold somehow in the U.S. marketplace. And that's what I assist them in doing.
So you help these French companies, these early stage startups that want to enter the U.S. market, you help them with their sales here and make introductions. Is that right?
In a way, yeah. So I'm a sales consultant, so maybe make introductions is, I would say, I wouldn't necessarily say make introductions as much as I would say try to gain them market share.
Okay.
So it could be the end customer that I sell the product to. It could also be some type of partnership or co-distributorship deal that would, in essence, distribute the product, but it wouldn't necessarily be the end user that would be buying from me. So it's whatever strategic sales decisions are made from the owners in Paris or in France, and how they're entering the U.S. It should be noted that I'm not only a sales consultant. I'm a sales consultant for French Tech Hub, but I also do sales on my own. So I represent companies outside of French Tech Hub. It's companies trying to sell in the U.S.
Great. So I guess let's start with French Tech Hub, or just companies from France coming to the U.S., and then talk about companies here.
Sure.
So how do you talk to them about sales strategy, and what's their initial idea of entering the market, and how do you kind of work with them to give more of a realistic idea of how to go about things in the pipeline and the sales channels, all that stuff?
The first thing I try to keep in mind always is time. I need them to be realistic. Quite frequently I'll say, I create sales leads. The objective of Sales Factory is to get sales leads, right? Quite often they think I have them in my front pockets.
Okay.
I don't. I'll tell you, the first one to admit, I do not. If you show up tomorrow and ask me for those leads, I don't know exactly where I'm going to get them. I'm going to try to source them in different ways, but I don't. Just because you showed up, it doesn't mean I know where to go. So that's the first thing I would say is time. You got to be very realistic with what is appropriate and what's inappropriate in terms of that. And the second thing I would say is be concise. Be as specific as you possibly can for what it is that you're going for. If you want any business in any market in any industry, that's going to be a lot more difficult. If my first statement is time is the first thing you need to understand, and you want any business at all, it's going to take a lot more time to get any business at all. But if you can specifically say, I need a certain market segment I need 5 of these 100 companies, or I want these top 25 companies, these are the guys that I'm going for, then it becomes much, much easier for me to isolate and figure out who I need to contact at those companies, how I can network into those companies, how I can cold call those companies, for example. And so those would be the 2 things I would say initially I run into: time, and then being as concise as you possibly can.
Well, tell me about time, I guess. What are the steps that might take time, and how long would they take?
So what's going to take the most amount of time is understanding what your value proposition is to the U.S. market, who it is you're going to sell the product to, and where you're going to sell it. So what market or what industry, what sector. Quite frequently, sales in Europe is different than sales in the United States. Elsewhere in the world, many people quite often want to know everything that the company does. And they want to know A to Z, right? They want to fully vet the startup, or they want to fully vet the technology before they do anything at all. Here in the US, it's a different sales cycle. If I come to you as a salesman, I am very quickly trying to identify what your need is, and that's what I'm going to sell to, right? This is my product, and it's going to solve this need that you have,
Okay.
and therefore we have what I would call attention, and we have a buying motive. That, I think, is one thing that's a big difference, sales in the US versus sales elsewhere in the world. And so coming here, you do need to understand that mentality, but you also, more than anything, need to understand the mentality that, there will be a market capability, and there will be the need to know that you are going to enter the market in the appropriate way. So you need to enter, so going after the appropriate customers.
Okay. So if a startup came to you and said, this is our product, we want to get connections to these companies, and you looked at it and just said, realistically, no, you should go to these companies, or how would you talk to them to actually give more of a realistic or more guidance from years experience here that they might not have?
Sure. So I would say a lot of it has to do with strategy, and coming up with, before you go out contacting potential customers, before you go selling to those customers, coming up with a strategy for who's the right market, who's the right customer fit. So quite frequently, and that does happen. They'll often say, I'm ready to go into sales. And I go, and you go back through the list, and they have no sales support documentation, or they have no ability to deliver the sale if you were to make the sale, right? If I were to pass you a lead, and then the worst thing a salesman can get if I pass you the lead is, oh, well, I can't deliver that sale for another 3 months. And it's like, well, do you know what kind of work just went in for me to get that lead for you? You know how much effort that is. That's a lot of time and blood, sweat, and tears, and nonetheless my blood, sweat, and tears. And so not having the sale, not having the support to deliver the sale is something else that I look very closely at. Will the company be able to deliver the product and service that they say that they have? And it's quite oftentimes it's by no fault of their own. These are startups. So what you're looking for when you sell for a startup is maybe a little bit more mature of a company, maybe a Series B or Series C, as opposed to a seed rounded a company that's seed or Series A.
What if a seed company or an A-round company comes to you and says, listen, our MVP is now ready, we want to go to market? What's your advice there?
Can I see the MVP? That's my first step. Is what information you say I'm ready to go to market. Okay, so what makes you think you're ready to go to market? And walk me through that that sales process. One of the great things, one idea that I have is quite often to do a role play with me. So if I were going to buy that product and I were to sit in that sales meeting, how would you sell it to me? How would you position the product? And just be me, like you and me talking right now. Sell it to me as you would to anybody else, and see how well the sales pitch is, and whether or not you maybe have some of the appropriate documentation. In that role play, what I'll ask for maybe a use case, or I'll ask for white papers, which is sometimes maybe not lacking, but sometimes it could be better, so to speak.
So the documentation, would you recommend the founder do it on his own, or would you recommend them finding professionals, copywriters, or that to work with? Or how would you recommend them creating these documents, these sales sheets?
I think acculturation, what they call is acculturation. So what one word means in French doesn't necessarily mean the same in a direct translation to English. Or there's a certain way of interpreting a phrase or a common saying over in France as opposed to how it would be said here. I don't necessarily know that copyright is necessary all the way. You don't necessarily need to go get a lawyer who can be pretty expensive to copyright something, but certainly taking the advice from somebody who is a native speaker of the language, I would recommend. Saying, if I said to a Frenchman, a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush, They would say, what? Or if I said, hey, close only counts with horseshoes and hand grenades. Or I said, if I just nonchalantly said, hey, horseshoes and hand grenades. And you would know what I meant, right? Because close only counts. They would have no clue. Was in that language, in that culture, that those means there's a different way to say that, right? So that's acculturation. I think there's a big difference between translation and making sure you get it culturally correct.
Okay, now let's go for a startup here in the U.S. that you're working with.
Sure.
Local Silicon Valley trying to work with. They come to you. They don't have any sales material yet. How would you go about coaching them on getting that?
That's almost where there would be a breaking point, is where I wouldn't necessarily sell for them right away, as much as I would say this is the type of information that I would like to see before I sell.
Okay.
That would be kind of a red flag for me. If you don't have white papers, or if you don't have, if you don't know what your target market pays.
Just wondering for people out there.
A white paper is something that you might pick up at a trade show. Just a one-page PDF write-up on whatever the product or service is. That you can easily hand, and if I were to read through it, it would give me I would have a good understanding of what the product is or services that you're attempting to sell.
Oh. Can you tell me about sales cycles?
Sure. Sales cycles are one of the critical parts of a sales process. It's understanding how long it's going to take you from day one, conversation one, to finishing the sale, to completing the delivery of the product. Sales cycles are maybe one of the things that are very well misunderstood in the world of sales quite frequently. Somebody will say, I have a 3-week sales cycle, and in reality, they just really wish they had a 3-week sales cycle. In reality, they've got a 6-month sales cycle. I don't think that's what you have. So that's essentially, by definition, what a sales cycle is, and they are critical to the process.
Okay, could you break down a sales cycle?
So a sales cycle is going to essentially be a start to finish, what it takes to initiate a conversation and to close a sale. So if I were selling a product that would require me to meet somebody face to face, my sales cycle may be, let's call it 2 months. So I would make my initial phone call. I would set up an appointment within the first 2 weeks of month one. I would try to get some type of buy-in at the first meeting. Of why they wanted the product, or what their motivating factor may be to buy the product. In other words, what's the need that they're going to meet. And from there would be a quote process. So you probably, by the end of month one, maybe send a quote. They'll come back and give you some feedback on the quote. Towards the middle of month two, you should be ready to send a final quote or send a final proposal. And in a 2-month sales cycle, maybe through the course of 3 or 4 meetings and 2 quotes, you have a standard sale. That's basically what a sales cycle is.
Okay. And then what's kind of your view? So there's 2 startup founders, or maybe a team of 3. Engineers, they're creating a product. Now they have to actually start making revenue. One of them goes, okay, I'll start doing sales for the team. What would your advice be if that group came to you?
And they had no experience in sales before?
No experience in sales, but they all have masters and PhDs.
Oh, even better. Friends, family, and LinkedIn profile is the first place I start. Who do you, what you want to look for is know, like, and trust. That's the answer that's what you're trying to get to. Who knows me, who likes me, who trusts me.
Okay.
Start there. If you can start with who knows, like, and trust, the people, they might not buy your product, but at least they'll listen to your sales pitch because they know, they like, and they trust you. And if you have no experience in sales and you're a bunch of PhDs and engineers, you're going to butcher the sales pitch quite frequently early on. So you really want to do it with people that won't call you out on it, that won't force you to get to the end of the sale quickly, will actually listen to the sales pitch.
Great. So earlier on Silicon Valley Successes, I think it was episode 4, we had Doris Pickering with Silicon Valley Speaks that gave a lot of tips on honing your sales pitch. So if you want to watch that episode, please visit siliconvalleysuccesses.com. Once again, that's siliconvalleysuccesses.com for more information. And also visit our Facebook and check us out on LinkedIn. Now let's get back to Whit. Whit, please tell us a little bit more about maybe a founder, they have a team, they've raised some funding, they want to hire a salesperson. What attributes or qualities should they look for in hiring that person? What should they expect from him or her?
Do I get a specific industry that this?
We'll say it's an IoT IoT company.
IoT device of some sort. Okay. So the attributes of somebody that you're looking for in sales, it can vary. If they're a technical expert, if there's a needs for that technical expertise of some type within the IoT world, you might be looking for somebody with a little bit more experience and maybe not as much cold calling, for example. If you're looking to hire one person, I would say almost 100% of the time, if I'm going to hire a salesperson, I'm looking for the person itself who is going out and representing the product. Sales is one of those things that I can't, if I'm your boss, I'm not going to show up at your bed and wake you up in the morning. You got to get up and you got to do it yourself, and it is unforgiving. I know many people think sales is an easy thing, or salesmen aren't that bright, or they're not, they're only reiterating or regurgitating whatever it is the company told them to say. And I'm a salesman, so I disagree, of course, but you might be right. But what I do think is that because they have that mentality, because they have that genre about them, or that reputation, quite often people think, well, you can just get any salesman out there, they're a dime a dozen. So I would go for somebody with a little bit, if I'm a startup of 3 selling in an IoT world, probably somebody that has a little bit of experience in sales, but for the most part has the tenacity to go out there and actually build a book of business, actually build a group of clients that will buy this product, because that nitty grittiness that you call it, the stick-to-itiveness that is common the phrase in sales, is very, very difficult to find. It is a tough commodity to find.
Okay, now how should a startup founder that doesn't really know much about sales kind of measure the progress of their salesperson? Like, for example, I was eavesdropping in a conversation earlier about one startup that had a sales representative and then just fired that person. I didn't hear the whole conversation, but I think you heard some of it.
I was in the conversation.
Could you tell a little bit about that without giving any names, and
without
kind of see
name dropping
from your opinion?
Yeah. So the story, to catch the viewers up, is basically a founder of a company fired a salesperson that they had that was making appointments for them. I don't have all of the details. From my perspective, they were scheduling an appointment a day. Based off the time and the numbers that I was shown. I broke it down to meaning that they, in a 1 month period, they worked for 13 days and they scheduled 13 appointments. If you were going to do that, depending on what you're scheduling an appointment for, I'd say that's pretty good. And I'd say I would be very happy if I was the founder getting 13 appointments in a 1 month period. And the other question that I would kind of ask the founder is exactly how many appointments were you hoping to get out of this? Appointment setting is a very unforgiving thing to do. You sit at a phone all day and you sit there and you smile and you dial. Dialing for dollars, is another way to put it. And so what I heard in that story is apparently the founder said it seemed like they were wasting time. It seemed like from the the amount of time that they were on the phone versus not on the phone, there was a lot of 30-minute windows, gaps, where they were unable to see what the appointment setter was doing. I've been on that phone before. I know what it means to sit that chair. I would say that's an overreaction by the founder. If you have somebody who's producing sales or producing your leads, and you have no other viable option to get those sales or to get those leads, I'd think very carefully about letting somebody go who's actually producing numbers.
Okay, so that's very interesting that appointments are kind of a key indicator of performance. Another thing I'd like to talk about, the marketing and sales team, how they interact. Could you talk about that for early stage companies? Because early stage companies, the salesperson might also be the marketer, might also be biz dev, might be all these roles. Correct?
Right. Sure.
So how do they balance their time? What type of... Yeah.
Well, what you want to see from marketing from a sales perspective are leads that are qualified. That's always
what do you mean by qualified leads?
It has to be a lead that makes a difference. That somebody that will listen to the sales pitch, or somebody that will take the appointment and actually consider the product. There are plenty of marketing arms of company, marketing arm of a company.
What?
Thanks, I appreciate that. There are plenty of marketing arms that will deliver junk leads. And that's the most frustrating type of lead to go on if you're a salesman, because you show up and you're expecting to sell a $50,000 data analytics product to a pet food, mom and pop pet food store. And it's like, where did this lead come from? Who gave me this? I just drove an hour for this thing. So that's one of the, so where marketing and sales kind of meet up within a startup, what I would say is qualified leads. You want to make sure that the leads that you're bringing in the door, however it is you're getting them, LinkedIn advertisements, Google advertisements, they qualify.
Okay. What type of feedback should the sales team give the marketing team if there's now two people? Say that the company's
It's big enough to have two people.
have two people. What type of information should they give in communication back and forth to actually help each other do more in their
What they
careers?
want to talk about is why they're buying, or why what the salespeople believe is the buying motive. In other words, what's the need for the marketing lead that I sent you? If I sent you a marketing lead and you're a salesman, I want you to come back and say, this was not a good lead because it didn't have this X, Y, Z need. What is it that you're selling to? What are you selling for? And are you able to meet that within the marketing arm? So are you identifying the people who are going to buy for the motives and the reasons that you think that they're going to buy for?
Okay, how do you first discover these reasons or motives for them buying? If you haven't sold any products yet, you're developing your product.
Your value proposition to the market, of course. What's your company, what's your product, what's your service do better, different, or not better than anybody else out there? Are you copycatting another company? Are you just simply are you Lyft and you're the second one, which is not a bad company to be, don't get me wrong, they're very successful. But, are you the second mover in the market, which isn't, again, it's okay to be, but somehow you have to deliver a need. And no matter what, as much as you want to say people buy because they really want or like my product, that's 9 times out of 10 not the case. They bought it because they needed it. So what's the need that you're meeting? That just goes back to the value proposition of the product itself or the service.
So, question on the value proposition. So say you have a general idea of how much it'll solve the solution, how much money it'll save the client versus what's out there. How do you go about pricing your product, or set in terms or gifts or promos or whatever like that?
Yeah, pricing can be arbitrary quite frequently, especially for startups who say, I'll take any business. So, and it's like, really, you don't want to walk in and say that. But how do you go about pricing it? You can use any number of methodologies. If I'm in a sales role, if I'm in a sales...
Or how much leeway should you give your salesperson to determine the price in a meeting?
Well, I would give me 100% leeway. But I would give them, I would play it by ear on how comfortable your salesperson is talking about that. I often talk quite frequently about price in sales meetings because I don't want it to be a hiccup later on. So quite early in the sales process, I'll try to ask a question of, what's the value of, what is the value of a product like this to you? Or one of the questions I'll ask is define success. I want the customer to tell me if they were to buy this product, how do they use it, right? How does it define success within your world, which will quite often gauge, for me at least in my mind, how much money they may be willing to spend or what's their overall budget. But yeah, I ask the question very, very early on in the sales process. If somebody is unrealistic about what the purchase price of a product that I'm selling is, I don't want to spend too much time going after that lead. I kind of want to put them on the back burner, to be honest.
Interesting. So to go over a little bit of everything we've talked about so far, we've talked about qualified leads versus unqualified leads. We've talked about sales cycles. We've talked about getting information from other countries or companies when they establish their entities or their sales in another country to actually get the white papers, the promo material for that culture. We've talked about expectations and delivering expectations. We've talked about if the startup team actually has sales experience versus not having sales experience, the communication between the marketing and salesperson. We've talked about a bunch of things. What else do you wish or knowledge that you think a startup out there should know about sales? And the tenacity of a salesperson.
And the tenacity, the stick-to-itiveness, yeah, the made-up word. I think that more than anything, what I would advise somebody, a startup I'll start over. What I would advise a founder to go to if they were going to start a sales team in the U.S. Is I would come up with a sales funnel. I would be very, very specific about the sales funnel that I would want my sales team to have. So what a sales funnel is essentially is, if it takes, it takes X, Y, Z to get one sale, right? So then based off that one sale, I need so many quotes in order to get four. If it takes 4 quotes to get one sale, then how many appointments do I need in order to get 4 quotes?
Okay.
If it takes how many phone calls do I need to make in order to get that many appointments? So say I need to make 100 phone calls to get 10 appointments.
Okay.
To get 4 quotes.
Okay.
And that breaks down to 1 sale.
Okay.
So then I know that's my sales funnel. Then I know I go back out to my sales team. I say, okay, now every week you need to make 400 phone calls to brand new customers, brand new prospects, and you need to try to start a conversation in order to get an appointment. Because of those 400 phone calls you make, you are going to get so many appointments, you're going to get so many quotes, and that's going to be what's required in order for you to get the sales. That would be the thing that I would point to first for a founder to come up with before they hired a whole sales team. Show me what a sales funnel looks like for your product, for your marketplace that you're selling to, for you specifically. It could be a sales funnel that requires a 6-month sales cycle. It could be a 2-month sales cycle. I don't know. But I would first look at the sales funnel.
Okay, with that, we're almost out of time, but Whit, could you tell the audience how they can reach you and get more information?
Absolutely, yeah. The best way to reach me is LinkedIn, Whit Howland, and the LinkedIn profile. If you connect with me and shoot me a message, I will be more than willing to respond to you.
Who's your best client to work with? Who would you want to reach out to you?
Anybody that's in renewable energies or the renewable sector that has a product that's being sold or could be sold to the utility sector.
Great. Thank you for your time today. And once again, that's Silicon Valley Successes. For more information, please visit our website, siliconvalleysuccesses.com, our Facebook group. Check us out on LinkedIn. And stay tuned, as next week we're going to have some exciting guests that will provide you information to help you become the next success.
Thank you from all of us at Silicon Valley Successes. We hope you found the information presented today useful in your path to success. For further information on accessing the resources in Silicon Valley, you may visit us on the web at siliconvalleysuccesses.com, on Facebook and YouTube. Thank you. And remember, we want to help you in your journey to become the next success.